You are on the What I Never Saw channel. Enjoy watching.
I wasn't even looking for anything. It was just a typical Saturday morning. Quiet, unassuming, kind of boring in the best way. I was alone in the house for the weekend, which meant I could take my time waking up. No back-to-back noise. No schedules. Just me, a pot of coffee, and a slice of leftover pizza I didn't even bother to microwave. Harper, my wife, had left Friday morning for a work retreat in the mountains somewhere north. Some upscale, woodsy lodge her company booked for a strategy weekend. She'd been a project lead for about 6 months, and they were grooming her for a bigger role, at least according to her. I was proud of her, at least I had been. Lately things between us had been off, but I chalked it up to stress, new responsibilities, long hours. We both had demanding jobs. It wasn't the kind of thing that felt urgent enough to question. You know how it is, you see the cracks, but you figure the foundation's still holding. I opened Instagram mostly out of habit, just scrolling through people's filtered lives. Friends with babies, coworkers flexing gym selfies, a few dogs in Halloween costumes even though it was April. Nothing out of the ordinary. Then I saw it. It was just a tagged story. Not even from Harper's account. One of her coworkers had posted it. I recognized the username, Justin. I'd met him once at a company barbecue. Tall, fit, always wore button-downs a size too small. He struck me as the kind of guy who called everyone bro and told women to smile more. His Instagram was public, one of those curated accounts that tried to make ordinary life look like a cologne commercial. His latest story pinged with Harper's username tagged. My thumb hesitated for maybe half a second before I tapped. The video was just a few seconds long. Some ambient music playing, a fireplace in the background, and people lounging around with wine glasses. But there she was, Harper, on the couch, laughing at something off-camera. Same tight black sweater she wore when she left yesterday morning. Same silver hoop earrings. Hair curled. Makeup light but sharp, just enough to say, I made an effort, but the background wasn't a lodge. It wasn't even close. It looked like someone's apartment. A modern loft, warm lighting, tall windows with dark curtains. A flickering fire cast shadows across the floor. There were throw pillows, an open wine bottle, and, just barely in the frame, a man's hand, resting behind her on the cushion, close enough to be touching her back. Not overtly, but not nothing. The caption read, Chill night W, the crew fire. That was it. That's all it took for my gut to clench. Something about the whole scene, the casual and asterisk Macy, the setting that didn't match her story, the way Harper looked completely at ease, it didn't sit right. And it wasn't just jealousy. I'm not the jealous type. It was something else. Like that feeling you get when you realize you left the stove on. I stared at the screen for a moment, rewatched the story, paused it, took a screenshot asterisk T. Then, without overthinking, I forwarded it to Harper. Her reply came too quickly. Less than a minute. Haha, wow. That's just a random snap from Justin, faced with tears of joy. We were at the Airbnb before heading to the workshop. His girlfriend took that. Nothing weird, babe. The emoji, the tone, the way she breezed through it like it wasn't even worth a second glance. It didn't calm me, it froze me. I sat there holding the phone, feeling this strange detachment from my body, like I was watching myself from a distance. The message didn't sound like Harper. It sounded like a press release, like something typed out ahead of time, rehearsed, pasted from memory. Too clean, too fast. I replied, cool. Hope the retreat's going well. That's it. That's all I said. Could have asked more. Could have pressed. But I didn't. I knew if I pushed, she'd just deflect again, and I didn't want to start something I wasn't ready to finish. Not yet. Instead, I sat there, watching the cursor blink on my phone screen, that little space where her next message might come. But it didn't. She left it there, like the conversation was over. And maybe for her it was, but for me that's when it started. I stared back at the photo again, zeroing in on details I'd missed the first time. The stem of the wine glass in her hand, the curve of her smile, the way her legs were crossed toward someone just out of frame. That man's hand again, well-groomed, maybe older. Ring finger bare. My mind went into overdrive. I wasn't trying to spiral, but I could feel the pull of something deeper. I scrolled through Justin's profile, looking for other posts, other tags. A few pictures from earlier in the day. Group sh*ts of the retreat, Harper smiling in the background, always near the same two people. Justin and some guy in a charcoal sweater I didn't recognize. I clicked on the man's profile. Private. No bio. No posts viewable. But his profile picture was just vague enough Harper could have known him. Probably did. I started thinking back to the night before. I had texted Harper around 9 p.m., asking if she got there okay. She'd replied a half hour later with, "All good. It's cozy up here. I might crash early though, so don't worry if I don't text later. Miss you, Red Heart. Miss you." That message now felt like a snow globe, shiny on the outside, but hollow inside. Nothing in that story looked like an early crash night. Nothing about her body language looked like she missed me. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something cracked. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a shatter. It was subtle, like that first creak of wood when a floor starts to rot underneath the surface. You don't see it yet, but you know something's shifting. I sat there for maybe an hour, the coffee now cold, my phone still in my hand. I rewatched the story until it expired. I didn't mention it to anyone. Not my brother. Not my best friend. Not even my therapist, who I hadn't seen in months. It felt too early to say the words out loud. But I knew that something wasn't right. It wasn't the photo that scared me. It was how easily she explained it away. How easily I almost believed her. Or maybe how much I wanted to. Because if it was nothing, why was my chest this tight? Why was I already running through memories like a detective piecing together a case I didn't want to solve? I didn't sleep much that night, and I couldn't shake the feeling that what I saw wasn't just a moment. It was a clue. That night, sleep didn't come. Not really. I laid there in the dark, eyes wide open, staring at the faint outline of the ceiling fan above me, listening to the soft mechanical click as it rotated. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo again. The firelight, the way Harper smiled like she didn't have a husband back home scrolling Instagram in silence. I wasn't even angry. That's the part that freaked me out the most. I just felt hollow, like someone had taken a piece of me and didn't bother to tell me when they were done with it. And once that suspicion takes root, it doesn't stay quiet. It crawled backward through time. Suddenly, every memory felt different. Familiar but off. Like I'd been watching reruns of my own life but hadn't noticed someone had changed the script. I remembered last fall, October maybe, I had walked past her in the kitchen as she was on her laptop. She snapped it shut like a trap, flinched like she'd been caught watching something she shouldn't. I asked, jokingly, "What's the big secret?" And she smiled, that strained kind of smile people make when they're forcing their eyes to match the expression. "Just work stuff," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear like she always did when she wanted to change the subject. I didn't press. But now I couldn't stop thinking about it. Then there was the perfume. Harper used to be a minimalist. She wore clean scents, subtle, like fresh linen or citrus. But sometime after New Year's, she started wearing something heavier, spicier, a perfume that lingered in the air long after she'd left the room. She'd spritz herself before yoga, before grocery runs, before going to grab coffee with friends. I asked about it once, offhandedly, not accusatory. "You smell nice," I'd said. She smiled. "Just trying something new. Do you like it?" "Yeah," I replied. "Just surprised you're wearing it to CVS." She laughed. "A girl's gotta keep her edge, right?" I smiled back. But the way she said it, it didn't feel flirty. It felt like I was being reminded that someone else might be watching her too. The phone was next. She used to leave it everywhere. On the coffee table, by the sink, half buried under couch cushions. If it buzzed, she'd pick it up absent-mindedly and usually say something like, "Ugh, work." But then, sometime in early spring, the phone went silent. Always face down. Notifications off. Never more than a few feet from her. I started noticing patterns. Yoga nights every other Thursday. Errands that took 2 hours to get dry cleaning from a place 10 minutes away. Dinners with just the girls. But no photos, no group texts I was ever shown. When I asked how it went, the stories felt vague, disjointed. I used to think I was just overanalyzing things. I mean, everyone forgets details sometimes, right? But the contradictions piled up. One week she told me she and Laura had tried a new Indian place for lunch. 2 weeks later, she said she hated Indian food and hadn't had it in years. It was like she couldn't keep track of her own cover stories. I remember one night in particular. We were watching a movie, some thriller she'd picked. The kind of film we used to joke through, tossing popcorn and making up fake endings. This time we sat in silence. Her eyes never really left the screen, but I wasn't convinced she was actually watching. At one point, I reached over to hold her hand. She let it sit there for a second. Then she shifted her arm to grab her wine glass, just slow enough to make it look unintentional. But I felt it. That hesitation. That small, calculated retreat. We used to hold hands all the time. At movies. At restaurants. On walks through the neighborhood. I used to joke that her hand just fit mine, like it had been custom made for it. But these days, the contact felt foreign. Like I was reaching for someone who didn't want to be reached. It wasn't all at once. That's the cruel part. It was gradual. A slow bleed. So slow, you almost convince yourself you're imagining it. I mean, how do you measure emotional distance? There's no GPS for that. There's no "you are now 400 miles from her heart" notification. You just wake up one day and realize you don't know how long it's been since you kissed her without thinking. How long it's been since she kissed you first. It's weird what your mind holds on to. Like how she started dressing differently. Tighter jeans. Low-cut sweaters. She'd say, "I'm finally feeling confident in my body again." And I'd tell her she looked amazing. And I meant it. But it also felt like she was performing for someone, and that someone wasn't me. I didn't say any of this out loud, of course. What would I even say? "Hey, I'm suspicious because you're taking care of yourself more than usual?" That doesn't land. That makes me sound insecure. So I kept it to myself like I had with everything else. I smiled when she smiled. I nodded when she gave me another vague update about a meeting running late or a happy hour going long. I told myself, "You're overthinking. Don't be that guy." She'd tell you if something was wrong. But even that thought started to feel like a lie. Because things were wrong. I could feel it every time she left a room without saying goodnight. Every time she forgot to ask about my day. Every time I caught her staring out the window during dinner like her mind was someplace else. Like she was waiting for a message that never came. I started second-guessing myself constantly. Was I imagining this? Was I reading too much into it? Maybe this was just a rough patch. Every couple has them. Maybe we were in a rut. But the thing about ruts is they're mutual. You both feel them. You both try to climb out. Harper didn't seem interested in climbing. She seemed distant, detached. Some nights, she'd crawl into bed long after I did, claiming she had work to finish. I'd pretend to be asleep, but I was listening for typing, for footsteps, for voices. Once, I swear I heard her whispering. Not a phone call, just low murmurs. When I asked her the next morning if she'd been up late, she just smiled and said, "You must have been dreaming." Maybe I was. But if I was, it wasn't a good one. The worst part is, I still loved her. That never stopped. Even now, with all the doubts building like storm clouds in my chest, I still looked forward to hearing her key turn in the door. I still wanted her to sit next to me on the couch. I still wanted to be wrong. I wanted so badly to be wrong. But as I sat there, replaying months of details I had once dismissed, I realized this wasn't a dream. This wasn't paranoia. It was a pattern. A slow, deliberate unwinding of something that used to feel like home. And I was finally starting to see it for what it was. A puzzle I'd ignored too long was now building itself in my head, piece by piece. And the image forming was not the one I wanted to see. It's strange how confirmation doesn't always come in a dramatic moment. No big confession, no caught in the act cliché. Sometimes it just happens, quietly, casually, like the world was always trying to show you, and you're only just now ready to see it. It was a Friday evening, 2 weeks after the Instagram photo. Harper said she was staying the night at her friend Laura's place. Apparently they were having a wine and wellness night, something involving essential oils, rom-coms, and tarot cards. I didn't argue, didn't even flinch when she kissed me on the cheek and said, "Don't wait up." But this time I didn't sit home. I didn't spiral. I got in the car. My plan wasn't to follow her, not exactly. I just needed to be somewhere else. The walls of our house had started to feel like they were closing in. Every room echoed with silence. Every object felt like a lie. Even the framed photo of our wedding on the mantel felt like a stranger's memory. I told myself I'd go visit my sister, Katie. She lived across town and we hadn't caught up in a while. But about 15 minutes into the drive, I pulled off to fill up at this little gas station near the edge of downtown. One of those old-school places that still had the clunky pumps and the handwritten signs in the window. That's when I saw it. Harper's car, parked diagonally in the small lot of a cocktail bar across the street. Same license plate, same little dog-shaped air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror. For a few seconds, I stood there staring at it, like maybe my brain needed extra time to process. I even walked over, thinking maybe, just maybe, there was another explanation. Maybe she dropped Laura off. Maybe she was picking something up. But no, she was inside. I saw her through the front window, tucked into a corner booth, laughing, wine glass in hand. And she wasn't alone. There was a man sitting across from her. Not just sitting, leaning. He had that confident posture, the kind you don't have with coworkers or casual friends. His body turned toward her, their legs close, her hand resting near his elbow like it had been there before. Her eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. It was the kind of connection you don't fake, not without knowing exactly what you're doing. The worst part? She looked happy, not like someone sneaking around, not like someone weighed down by guilt. She looked free, like she belonged there, like the version of her sitting in that booth had never belonged with the version of me waiting at home. I didn't go in. I didn't cause a scene. I just stood there, still half hidden behind a parked car, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the traffic behind me. I took out my phone and snapped a picture, not because I needed proof for anyone else, but because I needed to see it again later and know I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined it. I got back in my car and drove away. It wasn't rage I felt. It wasn't even heartbreak. It was something quieter, heavier, like a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying had finally revealed itself. And now I was stuck with it in my lap. It was over. Maybe not the legal part. Maybe not the sleeping in separate beds part. But something had ended the moment I saw her with him. Something in me shut off. Like a switch. The part of me that had been holding on, hoping for a reasonable explanation, hoping I'd misread the signs, that part went dark. And in its place came clarity. All those little signs I'd brushed off, they weren't separate. They were the setup, the cracks in the story, the pieces of a machine working exactly as designed. And now I had seen the engine, the real engine, the one she never thought I'd notice. I don't even remember the drive back. I must have taken the long way home, because by the time I pulled into the driveway, it was close to midnight. The house looked the same as it always did, quiet, still, front porch light buzzing faintly. But it didn't feel like home anymore. Felt like a lie wrapped in siding. I walked inside and sat on the couch, staring at nothing. I must have sat there for an hour, maybe longer, and then my phone buzzed. A message from Harper. "Night babe, Redheart going to sleep soon. Laura's already snoring, lol. Love you." I stared at it, stunned by how easily she lied, how naturally it flowed from her fingers, like it was muscle memory now. I didn't respond, not because I wanted to scare her or start something, but because I didn't know what I'd say that wouldn't give away the fact that I'd seen everything. I couldn't unsee it. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Just closed my eyes and let the silence settle in. I felt numb, hollow, like my insides had been scooped out and replaced with static. The next morning I went through the motions. Made coffee, fed the cat, answered a few emails. She got home just before noon, still wearing the same jacket from the night before, hair tied up, looking slightly hungover. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, said, "We stayed up way too late. Laura has a new obsession with crystals and wouldn't shut up. I nodded, played along. I didn't say a word. I watched her walk to the bedroom, drop her overnight bag by the door, and disappear into the bathroom to shower. And as the water ran, I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She didn't look back. That's when I knew I wasn't part of her story anymore. I was just the background noise, the person she said goodnight to while texting someone else good morning. Over the next few days, things returned to normal, but it wasn't real. The space between us had stopped being tension. It had become something worse. Absence. She didn't ask how I was. I stopped pretending I was okay. We lived like roommates who shared a kitchen and a mailbox but not a life. She'd scroll on her phone next to me on the couch, her screen tilted away, laughing softly at things I'd never see. I'd nod at whatever she said, like it mattered, like I was still in the room with her. But I wasn't. I'd already left. Not physically. Not yet. But the version of me that had hoped for this marriage to still work. That guy was gone. And he wasn't coming back. There was no fight. No dramatic confrontation. No slammed doors. No raised voices. No tears. Just silence. That was the strange part. When something like this happens, when trust dissolves, you imagine chaos. You picture shouting, breakdowns, ultimatums. But what we had was quieter. More unsettling. It was like watching a candle slowly burn out, the wick turning to dust without anyone noticing until the room went dark. Harper came home from her wellness weekend and stepped right back into her role, like she hadn't just spent the night across town with another man. She unpacked her bag in the laundry room, made herself tea, changed into sweatpants, sat on the couch beside me and scrolled through her phone like she hadn't just lied to my face the night before. Like I didn't know. I said nothing. Not because I was afraid to speak, but because I didn't want to. I realized, in that moment, that I didn't need to hear her explain anything. I didn't want her version of the truth. Whatever she had to say would only be for her own comfort. I didn't need her to lie to me with soft words or choreographed apologies. I already had the truth. What I didn't have was the energy to chase down what I already knew. So I stopped chasing. That week, we lived in parallel. We cooked our own meals. We moved around each other like polite strangers in a shared Airbnb. The routines stayed the same, but the intent was gone. The rhythm was off, like music playing half a beat too slow. She didn't ask about my day. I didn't ask about hers. She'd leave in the morning without saying goodbye. I'd come home and barely register whether she was there. She didn't notice I had stopped wearing my wedding ring. That detail hit me harder than I expected. I had worn it every day since the wedding, even on days when it didn't match my clothes or when I was working with my hands and it got in the way. It had always been part of me, an unconscious habit. But after I saw her with him, I took it off that night, set it on the dresser, and never put it back on. I wanted to see if she'd notice. She didn't. That tiny gold band sat untouched for days, weeks even. She folded laundry around it. She dusted the dresser. One day, she moved it slightly to wipe the surface beneath it, but never asked why it wasn't on my finger anymore. I started keeping score of the silences. A sick little game I played in my head. Day 3. She didn't say good morning. Day 5. I stayed out past midnight and she didn't call or text. Day 6. She made dinner, but only for herself. Day 7. I mentioned I was thinking about getting a new couch. She didn't respond. It wasn't cruelty, it was absence. A kind of emotional vacancy that filled the room and **ked all the warmth out of it. I noticed small things disappearing. She stopped kissing me on the cheek when she came home. Stopped watching our shows with me at night. Stopped calling me babe. And I stopped caring. I stopped pausing whatever I was doing when she walked in. I stopped checking her phone's location when she left for meetings. I stopped trying to guess whether her vague explanations were lies or half-truths. They were all lies. That was the safe bet. And the truth was, she didn't care if I believed her anymore. That's what stung. Not the cheating. Not even the betrayal. It was the apathy. She had stopped pretending. And the moment she did, something inside me let go. I didn't even notice it happen. It was like watching someone walk out of a room and only realizing the door had closed minutes later. I stopped hoping she would come back to me emotionally, because deep down I knew she wouldn't. She already had someone else giving her what I couldn't. Mystery, novelty, escape. I wasn't shiny anymore. I wasn't new. I was the old sweater you forget is even in the closet. There was this one night, maybe 2 weeks after the bar. It was raining hard, like the kind of rain that hammers the roof and makes the windows rattle a little. We were both home, sitting in separate rooms. She was in the office, door closed. I was in the living room, flipping through channels, not watching anything. Around 10 p.m., the power flickered, then went out. Total darkness. No internet. No hum of appliances. Just the soft percussion of rain and the occasional thunder rolling in. She stepped out of the office, holding her phone flashlight. "Power's out," she said flatly. "Yeah," I replied, not moving. We stood there in the hallway, illuminated only by the phone's glow, like two people who used to love each other but had forgotten how. She didn't offer to light a candle. I didn't offer to reset the breaker. We just stared at each other for a second, long enough to register the space between us, then returned to our separate corners of the house. That was the night I stopped sleeping in our bed. It wasn't even a conscious decision. I just couldn't bring myself to climb in next to her. Couldn't pretend that we were still okay. So I grabbed a blanket from the hall closet and curled up on the couch. Told myself it was just for the night. But I never went back. And she never asked why. In the mornings, she'd pass by me in silence. Occasionally, she'd offer a half-hearted, "Did you sleep okay?" I'd nod. She never followed up. A month ago, that would have devastated me. Now, it just confirmed what I already knew. We were finished. And somehow, we were still playing house. There's this myth that relationships end in fire, that everything comes crashing down in one explosive moment. But that's not always true. Sometimes they end in water, in slow drips, in words that aren't said, in hands not held, in glances that don't linger. Our marriage wasn't burning. It was dissolving, like paper left in the rain. One night, I stood at the sink doing dishes and looked over at her sitting at the table, scrolling on her phone. I watched her for a long time. She didn't look up, didn't even seem aware I was there. I realized I could leave right then, walk out the front door, never come back, and she wouldn't notice until she needed something. That was the moment I knew it wasn't a matter of if I left, only when. We still had pictures on the walls, still had her mugs in the cabinet, my slippers by the door, our spare key taped under the porch light. But none of it meant anything anymore. They were just props in a play we had stopped performing. We hadn't said, "I love you," in over a month. The scary part? Neither of us missed it. Ava, of all people. We weren't close, barely more than acquaintances, really. She was one of Harper's newer friends. The kind that gets folded into the group through work or mutual yoga nights. I had met her maybe 3 times. Once at a backyard birthday thing, once at a wine tasting Harper dragged me to, and once when she came over for a girls' night and I ran into them in the kitchen while grabbing water. She had this energy, soft but sharp, like someone who could read a room in 2 seconds and also remember your dog's name from one random conversation. Her first message was about music. Totally out of the blue. "Okay, weird question. Didn't you once say you liked Gregory Alan Isakov?" I just heard San Luis and it made me think of that night with the fire pit. Still one of my favorite random music convos. That was it. Simple. No subtext. Just a memory. And yet, for some reason, it landed. I stared at the message longer than I should have, wondering what it meant, if anything. I hadn't thought about that night in months. Harper had thrown a casual dinner party, and I'd been tasked with background music duty. I picked an old playlist I'd made years ago, full of singer-songwriters and quiet guitar. Ava had lingered near the Bluetooth speaker for a moment, then said, "This is the kind of music that makes you feel like you're remembering something that never happened." I remember being caught off guard by how poetic that sounded. I think I even laughed and said, "I should be writing that down." "So yeah, maybe it wasn't just small talk." I replied, "Haha, wow. Yeah. That playlist is probably older than my car. San Luis still hits though. Good catch." She replied a minute later. Just had a long drive, saw mountains in the distance, and it came on. Made me think of that weird moment when the music was better than the party. Something about that made me smile. That line. The music was better than the party. Stuck with me. We messaged for a few more minutes. Just music stuff. Some recommendations. No flirting, no weird vibes. Just normal. Which oddly felt like a novelty. The next day she messaged again. This time about books. A memoir we'd both read. I hadn't talked about books with anyone in ages. Not really. Harper used to be the reader between us. Always had a novel by the bathtub or a stack on her nightstand. But somewhere along the way, she stopped talking about what she was reading. Or maybe I stopped asking. Anyway, it was nice. Like a tiny window cracked open in a room that had gone stale. Ava and I started messaging a few times a week. Always light. Always about something. A song, a quote, a random memory from some gathering we both vaguely remembered. And she never brought up Harper. Not once. That mattered more than I expected. Because by that point, everything in my life felt like it came with parentheses. Every sentence had a quiet subtext. Something people weren't saying, or weren't sure if they could say. Ava didn't do that. She just showed up. One Thursday afternoon, she asked if I wanted to grab coffee. Just that. No pressure. No worries if not. Just need an excuse to leave the house and talk about literally anything other than my inbox. I said yes. Not because I was looking for anything, but because I needed to remember what it felt like to be a person again. Person outside of waiting, outside of wondering, outside of lies. We met at a little place halfway between our neighborhoods. The kind with mismatched chairs, too many plants, and handwritten chalk menus. I got there first, grabbed a booth by the window, and tried not to overthink it. She showed up 5 minutes later in a faded hoodie, her hair half up, no makeup, holding her phone like it was a distraction she wasn't fully committed to. When she saw me, she smiled. Not a polite smile, but the kind that says, "I'm actually glad you're here." We talked for over an hour, and not once did I feel the need to filter myself. I didn't talk about Harper. She didn't ask. We talked about work, about why coffee always tastes better out of ceramic mugs, about old road trips and what song we'd want playing during the end credits of our lives. Her answer was, "I'll Try Anything Once" by The Strokes. Mine was The Stable Song, which made her nod slowly and say, "Yeah, that tracks." At one point, she put her hand on mine. It wasn't flirty. It wasn't loaded. Just a gesture. Simple. Human. I hadn't been touched like that in months. Not by someone who meant it. And for a second, something cracked open in me. Not the bad kind. Not like with Harper. This was different. It was small but real. It reminded me that I wasn't invisible. That I hadn't always been this version of myself. The quiet, dulled version who lived in the same house as a woman who no longer looked me in the eye. I didn't feel guilty. That surprised me. Maybe I should have. Maybe a part of me had expected guilt to rise like smoke, to stain the moment. But it didn't. What I felt was presence. And I hadn't felt that in a long time. After coffee, we walked to the parking lot together. It was cold out, but not uncomfortable. The kind of cold that makes you feel more awake. She hugged me goodbye, briefly, but tightly. Then she said, "Take care of yourself, Brian. I mean it." I stood there for a long time after she left, watching her taillights fade down the street. When I got home, Harper was already there. She was on the phone, sitting on the arm of the couch, her laptop open in front of her. She didn't pause when I walked in, didn't even glance up. I set my keys down, walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stared at the fridge. Nothing on it had changed, photos, magnets, that grocery list we hadn't updated in weeks. But all of it felt old now, like a snapsh asterisk T from a life that had been paused mid-scene. Harper ended her call eventually, closed her laptop, stretched. I turned around. She looked at me for half a second, then said, "Hey, you good?" I nodded. "Yeah." She nodded back. "Cool." Then she walked upstairs. And that was it. That was the extent of our connection that night. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel numb. I felt awake, and maybe a little sad. but not the crushing kind. The clean kind. The kind that lets you know you're still in there somewhere. Still breathing. Still real.